Hey there! In the basement of a house in Long Island, New York, there was a heavy metal drum weighing hundreds of pounds. That house had changed hands multiple times over the years. But for 30 years, that metal drum had never been opened. Finally, on a sunny day, a curious guy decided to crack it open to see what was inside. And just like that, a chilling secret hidden for 35 years came to light. This story takes place in 1999, and the location is Long Island, New York, USA. Long Island is an island in southeastern New York, specifically in Nassau County. It's part of a state known for having one of the most developed economies in the U.S. Our story centers on a homeowner named Joe Harris, who'd been living in the town for 9 years. One day in 1999, Joe decided to move to a new place. While packing up, he stumbled across something in the basement that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Let's rewind to September 2nd, 1999. September 2nd, 1999. It was a Thursday. Joe Harris, the homeowner, was getting ready to move out and had already cleared out all the stuff he didn't need so the new owner could move in any time. Early that morning, Joe hired a few movers and rented a truck to come to his place. They carefully packed up all kinds of items, big and small, and hauled out some junk too. But the moving process didn't go smoothly for long. One of the movers ran into a problem. He found a large metal drum in the basement of the house. The drum's surface was rusted, and the writing on it was faded, like it had been sitting there for years. The mover stepped forward and tried to lift the drum, putting in all his effort, but it wouldn't budge. He called for help, and 2 other guys came down to pitch in. Even with all 3 of them working together, they struggled to move the drum from the basement to an empty lot in front of the house. One of them turned to Joe and said, "Man, this drum's way too heavy. We can't get it onto the truck for you. We could only drag it out here. You'll have to figure out what to do with it." When Joe saw the drum, he suddenly remembered. That thing had been in the basement when he moved into the house 9 years ago, back in 1990. Back then, he'd thought about tossing it out to clear some space, but the drum was so heavy he couldn't move it, so he just left it there for the past 9 years. The more Joe thought about it, the more curious he got. He really wanted to know what was inside that made it so heavy. He grabbed a crowbar, headed back to the empty lot in front of the house, and started prying the lid open. When he finally got it off, a horrible stench hit him right in the face, making him dizzy. He caught a quick glimpse of something dark inside, but his curiosity pushed him to keep looking despite the smell. Peering closer, he saw a shoe and a human hand next to it. Terrified, he stumbled back a few steps and ran straight into the house to call the police. It wasn't long before the cops showed up at the scene. Once they arrived, they set up a perimeter around the drum to keep curious onlookers away. The discovery of the drum shattered the quiet of the small town. Locals started gathering around, trying to get a look at what was going on. The police had a hunch there was a body inside, but to preserve evidence, they didn't want to mess with it on site. So they took the entire metal drum back to the lab. The drum had a capacity of about 55 gallons and weighed around 350 pounds. It took lab technicians nearly 3 hours to carefully remove everything inside the drum. Inside, they found the body of a woman. She was fully dressed, but her clothes were old-fashioned, like something popular decades ago. The drum was filled with a bunch of black and white plastic pellets, and there was a greenish liquid in there too, later identified as a chemical dye. Everything inside had been soaked in it. They also found a handbag with a makeup case, a comb, an eyelash curler, and a dress book, 2 metal rings, one engraved with the name Marissa and a metal necklace with the inscription, "To Patricia, Love Cafe." The most important piece of evidence was the address book. If they could figure out what was written inside, the police might have a real shot at identifying the woman in the drum. But the book had been soaking in that liquid for years. It was so soft, you could poke a pen right through it, making it nearly impossible to recover the contents. During the autopsy, the coroner determined that the woman was pregnant, with a 9-month-old fetus still inside her. The cause of death was blunt force trauma. She'd been hit multiple times on the back of her head. The investigators started trying to identify the victim, looking for a petite Hispanic woman, about 4 feet 11 inches tall, among missing persons cases across New York State. But those criteria weren't specific enough. There were just too many missing women who fit that description. So the police shifted their focus, hoping the evidence inside the drum would lead them somewhere. They could still make out a serial number and the name of a chemical factory on the drum. The police tracked down the factory in New Jersey, and according to their records, the drum had been manufactured 34 years ago in 1965. It was originally used to hold chemical dye. A worker at the factory told them that particular dye hadn't been produced since 1971. Meanwhile, the police also questioned Joe Harris, wanting to know where he'd gotten the drum. Joe explained that when he moved into the house 9 years earlier in 1990, he'd found the heavy drum in the basement. He'd tried to move it but couldn't, and even though he was curious about what was inside, he saw the chemical label on it and decided not to mess with it. Joe seemed calm and didn't appear to be lying, so the police ruled him out as a suspect. Their investigation showed the house had had 4 owners in total. By tracking down the previous owners, the police confirmed the drum had been left there by the first owner back in the 1960s. That first owner was a man named Howard Elkin, who was now retired and living in Florida. The police talked to some older neighbors in the area to learn more about the house's original owner. They said Elkin had owned a company. He ran several businesses that made plastic products in Massapequa. When the police heard plastic products, they immediately thought of the large amount of plastic pellets inside the drum. The first owner, Elkin, had run a factory making plastic goods. Could there be a connection? Following this lead, the police dug deeper and found out that Elkin was a major shareholder in a company that mainly produced plastic flowers, grass, and decorations in the 1960s. They also learned that back then, the plastic factory had bought a batch of dye from the New Jersey factory to color plastic grass, trees, and other decorative products. News of the woman found in the drum spread like wildfire through the media. Right after that, the police got an anonymous call from someone who claimed to know some secrets about the drum. They said the drum was specifically used to hold chemicals, and while they didn't know who was inside, they knew a guy named Elkin, a shareholder in the plastic factory, who'd had an affair with a woman at the factory back in the 1960s. Coincidentally, this was the same person the police were already looking into, which only strengthened their suspicions. With the evidence they had, the police decided to track down Elkin for questioning. By then, Elkin was 70 years old and retired. He no longer lived in New York. He'd moved to Florida years ago. When he saw the police, he wasn't cooperative, but he reluctantly let them into his house. The police showed him a picture of the drum and asked, "Did your factory ever use drums like this to hold dye?" He replied, "My factory never used drums like that." They pressed further. "Did you ever use green dye in your factory?" Elkin said, "We never used dye at my factory. We didn't need chemicals." Now, the police had already done a thorough investigation into his company before meeting him, and his answers completely contradicted what they'd found. It was obvious Elkin was lying. The more he denied it, the more the police felt he was their guy. They kept going. "Did you ever have an affair?" Surprisingly, Elkin admitted to having an extramarital relationship, but he claimed it was just a fling over 35 years ago. So long ago that he couldn't even remember what the woman looked like. The police then pulled out a DNA collection kit. It's worth noting that by this time, DNA testing technology had come a long way, and it was a huge help in criminal investigations. If they could get Elkin's DNA, they might be able to confirm whether the fetus in the woman's body was his. So they asked, "Would you be willing to provide us with a DNA sample?" Elkin thought the request was unreasonable and told the police to get out of his house. Back at the lab, they were still working on recovering evidence from the drum. After some hard work, the crime lab technicians managed to recover part of the information in the address book. They found that on the second line of one page, it clearly said Mr. Elkin, followed by an address and phone number, but the number didn't work anymore. On another page of the address book, there was a name, Kathy Miranda, with a phone number listed below it. The police tried calling the number, and luckily, they got in touch with the owner of the phone, Kathy. They explained the whole story to her, and after hearing it, Kathy immediately identified the pregnant woman in the drum. She said her name was Reina, and she was from El Salvador. Over 35 years ago, Kathy had been an English teacher at a language school, and Reina was one of her students. Since they were the same age, they'd become really close. In 1966, Reina, then 26, had come to New York from El Salvador all by herself. She rented an apartment from a local and lived there alone. It didn't take her long to find a job at a plastic flower company, and Kathy said Reina had an amazing personality, always asking her parents back home for advice before making any big decisions. She had a lot of dreams, including becoming a U.S. citizen one day. Kathy said that before Reina disappeared, she'd told her she was pregnant, but never revealed who the father was. All Kathy knew was that the man was married and had 3 kids. Kathy had asked Reina if the guy was going to marry her, and Reina had said, "Of course he will." But Kathy went on to say that one time, Reina called her and said she'd found out the man had no intention of marrying her. That evening, unsure of what to do, Reina called the man's house. Unfortunately, his wife picked up the phone. Reina told the wife everything about their affair and her pregnancy. After that call ended, the man called Reina back, furious, and even threatened to kill her. Reina was terrified and didn't know what to do, so she called Kathy for advice. After hearing all this, Kathy got really worried about Reina and headed straight to her apartment. When she got there, she found the door unlocked. She rushed inside, looking for Reina, but there was no one there. Kathy waited for 3 hours, trying every way she could to reach her, but Reina was nowhere to be found. So Kathy went straight to the police station to report it. At the time, worried about damaging Reina's reputation, Kathy didn't tell the police that Reina's lover had threatened to kill her over the phone. Back then, the police just thought Reina might have gone shopping or something, and her disappearance remained an unsolved case, until over 30 years later, when the truth finally came to light. After hearing Kathy's story, the police were convinced that Howard Elkin, the major shareholder in the plastic factory, was the mystery man who'd had an affair with Reina. That night, he must have lured her to the factory and killed her. Then he transported her body to his own house. They figured he'd planned to dump her body in the ocean. That's why he put her in the metal dye drum, thinking it would sink to the bottom of the sea. He filled the drum with all sorts of materials, mostly plastic products from his own company. And after packing it full and sealing the lid, he realized he'd miscalculated. The drum weighed 350 pounds, way too heavy for him to move onto a boat by himself. In desperation, he had no choice but to stash the drum in his basement, where it sat undetected for 35 years. If it weren't for the fourth homeowner, Joe Harris, being curious enough to open it, this secret might have stayed hidden forever. Based on all this, the police named Elkin their #1 suspect. They quickly got a warrant to collect his DNA. But when they showed up at his house to take the sample, Elkin's wife told them he was gone. They later found him dead in his garage, sitting in the back seat of his car, blood all over the seat, with a gun next to him. The police determined it was suicide, not foul play. They still took a DNA sample from Elkin, and the results matched the fetus with 99.93% certainty. This confirmed the police's theory. At that point, the whole story came to light. But since Elkin was dead, they couldn't get the full truth about what happened. A reporter named Oscar Correa documented the case after the truth came out, publishing it in Newsday. He also made an effort to travel to El Salvador to track down Reina's family. Eventually, he found her mother, who was 95 years old by then. When she heard they'd found her daughter, missing for 35 years, she broke down in tears. Her greatest wish had been to see her daughter again, but Reina had paid the ultimate price for her affair. On the last page of the address book, there was a note, possibly written by Reina herself to Elkin. It revealed her helplessness and despair. Don't be mad at me for telling the truth. That's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.